Hello everybody. In our last class, I quoted some names under clinical feature and complication of burn. A few among them requires a little bit more emphasis as I quoted a name curling ulcer as a duodenal ulcer. When describing complications of the burn, it is actually an acute gastric erosion usually resulting as a complication of severe burn when reduced plasma volume leads to ischemia and cell necrosis of gastric mucosa. It appears in the form of multiple shallow erosion which may extend up to first part of the duodenum, cardiac end of the stomach and esophagus. Thus, some workers correlate it with duodenum. It was first described by Thomas Blizzard Curling, a British surgeon in 1823, so it has been given the name as curling ulcer. These ulcers were once a common complication of serious burn, presenting in over 10% of the cases, especially in children. The ulcers frequently results in perforation and hemorrhage, rendering the mortality very high, about 80%. In regard to its treatment, it has been observed that while emergency surgery was once the only treatment, combination therapies including internal feeding with powerful antacids such as H2 receptor antagonist or more recently proton pump inhibitor such as omeprazole have made curling ulcer a rare complication. Again, I quoted Marjolin ulcer. It is the name given to a neoplastic growth from scar tissue, malignant in nature, arising in chronic non-healing wounds. It has been defined as different pathological type of neoplasm, but squamous cell carcinoma is the most common identified histological type, followed by basal cell carcinoma, malignant melanoma, fibrosarcoma, liposarcoma, etc. Regarding its treatment, the large surgical incision is indicated, but in non-operational cases, radiotherapy followed by chemotherapy is also applicable. This potentially fatal complication typically occurs after a certain latency period, and here it paves the way for a homeopathic medicine to work, because after this latency it occurs in the form of a malignant ulcer. In between period, if certain medicines on the basis which it is studied under homeopathy, that ill effect of burn, and that is the carbolic acid, and causticum. These two are the most prominent medicines which are used for removal of or for combating the ill effect of the burn. And if such happens, in most of the cases it has been given and found that recurrence was almost negligible. Now we shall further discuss the pathophysiology of the burn injury In such cases, it is to say that damages may be caused in a number of ways following burn. The most commonly affected organ is skin. In addition, burn can also damage their other organs like airways, lung, immune system, intestine, etc., with priority in frequency accompanied with life-threatening consequences. So, one must take note of circumstances as well as warning sign of burn first to the respiratory system, that is, the circumstances like airways injury, which occurs when the face and neck are burned. Usually, if a person is trapped in a burning vehicle, house, car, or aeroplane and is bound to inhale the hot and poisonous air. Now, we have to trace out the warning sign, and the number one is burn around the face and neck, and the second, history of being trapped in above circumstances. Next, change in voice, stridor, again, when they assessing the injury to the airways, burn should be estimated at two levels. Number one, burn above the larynx. Hot gas can physically burn the nose, mouth, tongue, palate, and larynx. Once burnt, the lining of these structures will start to swell, which after a few hours may interfere the larynx further completely blocked. The airways here whistle, the danger of smoke, hot gas, or steam inhalation, and find that inhaled hot gas can cause supraglottic airways burn and laryngeal edema as it's the first sequence. And the next, inhaled steam can cause subglottic burn and loss of respiratory epithelium. Further, inhaled smoke particle can cause chemical alveolitis and respiratory failure. Inhaled poisons afterward, such as the carbon monoxide, and which can cause metabolic poisoning. Full thickness burn to the chest can cause mechanical blockage to the ribs movement. These are the most common consequences when burn affects above the larynx. And now, if the effect of burn occurs below the larynx, then what happens? Such injuries not usually happen because the heat exchange mechanism in the supraglottic airways can safely absorb the heat from the hot air. In spite, if the steam can cause thermal damage to the lower airways as it has large latent heat of evaporation, this type of injury causes rapid swelling of the respiratory epithelium and further their detachment from the bronchial tree. This creates the casts which can block the main upper airways. As I told earlier about metabolic poisoning, It is to note in this regard that any history of a fire in closed area may produce many poisonous gases, most commonly the carbon monoxide, which produces as a result of incomplete combustion of organic material in a respectively less presence of oxygen. This usually causes altered consciousness in victim. Why such happens? It is because the carbon monoxide binds hemoglobin with an affinity 240 times greater than that of the oxygen, therefore blocks the transport of oxygen. Concentration of carbohemoglobin about 10% is dangerous and need treatment with pure oxygen for more than 24 hours. Death may occur with concentration around 60%. Other metabolic toxin produced in the house fire is hydrogen cyanide, which causes a metabolic acidosis by interfering with mitochondrial respiration. How far the inhalation injury is concerned is caused by the minute particles within thick smoke which are not filtered up by the upper respiratory passage or airways due to their small size. When they are carried down to the lung parenchyma, this sticks to the most lining, causing an intense reaction in alveoli and leads to inflammation. This chemical pneumonitis causes edema within the alveolar sac and decreases gaseous exchange over the ensuing 24 hours and after gives rise to a bacterial pneumonia. Again, the burned skin becomes very thick and still thus it is stiff and can physically stop the ribs movement. If there is a large full thickness burn across the chest, when we consider the inflammatory and circulatory changes occurring as a consequence of burn, it is observed that away from the said danger which are readily apparent, the cause of circulatory changes following a burn are more complex. Overall effect of these changes is to produce a net flow of water, solute and proteins from the intravascular to extravascular spaces. This flow occurs over the first 36 hours after the injury but does not include RBC. In a small burn, this reaction is small and localized, but as the burn size appears 10 to 15% of the total body surface area, that is called TVSA, the loss of intravascular fluid can cause a level of circulatory shock. Furthermore, with increase in TVSA to 25%, the inflammatory reaction causes fluid loss in vessel remote from the burn injury. Due to this consequence, the surface area is required to estimated and used in framing the further treatment strategy like estimation of the fluid replacement to control the shock etc. It should be assessed considering the shock reaction after the burn, as burn produces an inflammatory reaction. Second, this leads to vastly increased vascular permeability. Third, water solute and proteins more from move the intra to extravascular spaces. The volume of fluid loss is directly proportional to the area of the burn, and the above 15% surface area, the loss of fluid produces shock. Except this, certain other life-threatening events are also to be considered, as the inflammatory changes caused by the burn have an effect on the patient and his immune system. Cell-mediated immunity is significantly reduced in large burn, leaving them more susceptible to bacterial and fungal infection. These are many potential sources of infection from burn wound, injured lung, and also from any central venous lines, tracheostomy or urinary catheter. These are of the prime importance. Again, the inflammatory stimulus and shock can cause microvascular damage and ischemia to the gut mucosa. This reduces the gut motility and can prevent absorption of food. This process also increases the translocation of gut bacteria, becoming an important source of infection in large burned area. Further, in full thickness burn, the collagen fibers are coagulated, the normal elasticity of the skin is lost. A circumferential full thickness burn to a limb acts as tourniquet, as causes the limb to swell. If it is left untreated, this will progress to limb-threatening ischemia. Now, further, after considering this, we have to think about the hospitalization of the patient, and prior to going to hospital, some immediate care of the burn patient is required as a pre-hospital care, and this is done adopting certain principles, and that are: number one, ensure rescue safety. This is a particularly important in house fire and in the case of electrical and chemical injuries, where the person who is engaged in rescue of the burn victim, care must be put upon them. Next, stop the burning process. Further stopping of the burning is one of the most important activity, and for that purpose a strategy has been framed, that stop, drop and roll. If a burned person is moving, he must stop, he must drop onto the ground, and he must roll on the ground. It is a good method for extinguishing fire or burning on a person. Now, check for the other injuries. A standard ABC. A for airways, B for breathing, and C for circulation. This ABC check, followed by a rapid secondary survey, will ensure that no other significant injuries are missed. Patient burnt in explosion or even escaping from fire may have head or spine injury and other life-threatening problems. It should be searched. Now, cool the burn wound. Cold application provides analgesia, and it is most frequent and foremost management for a burn patient to provide him something cool as early as possible. In last class, we discussed about the application of Canthridge, and if Canthridge is not available, simple rectified spirit, as the rectified spirit poured on a cotton wool is brought into contact of the burnt area. Just with the touch of that spirit, the patient feels suddenly rid of the burning sensation. And so this cooling of the burnt area must be imposed. Cooling should occur for a minimum of 10 minutes and effective up to 1 hour after the burn injury. It is particularly important first aid step in partial thickness burn, especially scald. The temperature in the temperate climate, cooling should be at about 15 degrees Celsius, and hypothermia must be avoided. Again, the oxygen. The patient should be given oxygen, or anyone involved in the fire of an enclosed space should receive oxygen, especially if there is an altered consciousness level. And next one is the elevation. Sitting a patient up with a burnt airways may prove life-saving in the event of a delay of transfer to the hospital care. Elevation of burnt limb will reduce swelling and discomfort. And after providing these, when you become able to bring the patient to the hospital, now the strategy also made in the hospital care, and the principle of managing an acute burn injury are the same as in any acute trauma cases, like the airways control, breathing and ventilation, circulation, disability, neurological status, exposure with environmental control, and fluid resuscitation. The possibility of injury additional to the burn must be sought both clinically and from the history, and treated approximately. The major determinant of severity of any burn injury are the percentage of the TBSA that is burnt, and the presence of an inhalation injury, and the depth of the burn. Now, the measure some determinants of the outcome of a burn, like the percentage surface of area involved, depth of the burn, and presence of an inhalation injury. Now, one should consider the criteria for acute admission to the burn unit. The patient, all which are victim of burn, is not liable to be admitted in the hospital. There are certain conditions under which they are bound to take admission to the hospital, and that is: number 1, suspected airways or inhalational injury. Next, any burn likely to require fluid resuscitation. Next, any burn likely to require surgery. Next, the patient with burn of any significance to the hand, face, feet or perineum. Next, patients whose psychiatric or social background makes it inadvisable to send them home. Next, any suspicion of non-accidental injury. Further, any burn in a patient at the extreme of the age. And lastly, any burn with associated potentially serious sequelae, including high tension electrical burn and concentrated hydrofluoric acid burn likewise. And in this way, one can conclude that either this patient is liable to be admitted in a hospital or not. Thank you.